Hello, everyone. Today is Tuesday, 13th of June, 2023. This is SIG Cluster Lifecycle office hour. I'm going to share the agenda doc and give the word to Lubomir, which has the first topic in agenda.
Hey, I just wanted to give a heads up to say that we started discussing the next API version of Kubedium, which is V1 Beta 4. I can post the link in Zoom chat. I cannot edit the doc right now. So maybe you can add it in my topic. This is basically the tracking issue of all the API changes which are proposed. Some of these we are dragging for multiple releases without either consensus of we are not agreeing on them, or maybe somebody just not taking ownership to complete the feature. But going through this list, it could be a very small API release with potential to drop like 50% of these punch card items. And one interesting idea was to potentially work on this API in multiple releases. Up until now, we had something like a strict schedule. Okay, we have one release, 5 people work on 5 different features, and we release the API. But now the idea is to simply not add this API into the schema. And this means that it will be a hidden API, not released. We can work on it multiple releases, and eventually it will be added in the schema, which means it becomes part of the Kubedium API or --config on the CLI. If you have any comments or demands for features that are missing in high-level components or just anything in general, please comment. This particular candidate list of features is owned by Dave Chen, who is a fairly active Kubedium contributor. So basically, everything is open for discussion at this point. Something that I personally have some favorites here, and we can get to them to discuss. But like again, if you have any comments on this list or want anything new added to the list, please add your comments. And that's all. If you have any questions, please go ahead.
Yeah, from my side, first of all, thank you for raising attention on this one. I will try to go through the list, provide feedback, and also advertise that at office hours, also internally at VMware, that this is happening. So we try to collect, give you feedback as soon as possible. What will be interesting for me looking at this list is that if we add a note about which change are breaking and which change are just additions, because so we can start focusing on the breaking changes, because these are the ones that will impact the users, while additions usually are smooth. It is just they are there and people can start using from when they are available. But I will comment on this issue, asking to update the list with breaking or not breaking. And yeah, thank you from my side. Cecile, Justin, do you want to comment? Go on, Cecile.
Yeah, I guess just one question from my side. Has there been any discussions in the past to get Kubedium out of beta, or is that not in the near term?
I think we just lack the confidence. And the main blocker is The main blocker is the so-called almost infamous node-specific component config, and it's a problem where we don't know how we can configure, for example, a control plane machine in a specific, unique way. Currently, we have a cluster configuration, which is basically applies to all the control plane machines and treats them as replicas. In the past, users, like for example, people who have something like a, I don't know, some sort of a hybrid self-hosted custom hardware, stuff like that, they require like a slightly more unique configuration for each control plane machine. It's certainly not the use case for, I click a button in a cloud provider and some high-level tooling deploys a cluster for me. And it has been a bit of a niche use case, but certainly also applies not only to control plane, but also to kubelet. Like, how do we ensure we have workers and like control plane machines managed in an instance-specific way? Currently, we just write flags, store patches on like files on disk, and it's really not an API. It's just we write stuff. And there have been ideas in the past, especially me and Fabrizio, we have been discussing this for a long time. Just how do we turn kubeADM into something more declarative? Like how do we store instance-specific configuration, perhaps in config maps? Like, there have been ideas, but until this happens, and who knows when it's going to happen, I think it might be safer for us to continue with beta. Or I see, by the way, kubelet folks have decided that like a V1 is on the way, despite all the noise inside the current implementation of kubelet configuration, which is like a mixture of local flags, fields, and global fields. It's a bit of a mess. But they have decided maybe it's a good idea to just release V1. And maybe we can do the same in kubeADM. Actually, I personally don't mind. And maybe we can say, like in a future, V2 is going to be quite breaking a complete redesign of what we have. So just again, we lack the confidence, and perhaps we just should vote. And the maintainers, high-level tools, we should just gather and decide what to do.
Thanks. Yeah, that makes sense. I think main reason I was asking is because I think I saw somewhere that Kubernetes was the project as a whole was trying to move away from like perma beta APIs, because that's like I think an issue across many APIs, that once it reaches beta, it's hard to gain the confidence to go to V1, but then folks are still using it anyways. Like tons of users rely on kubeADM in production, despite the beta status. But then, yeah, and I think I thought I saw somewhere that Kubernetes was going to enforce like a maximum number of releases that an API could be in beta, after which it either needs to be deprecated or it needs to be graduated. So I was wondering if that would affect kubeADM in any way, given this discussion.
We're kind of rebellious in terms of a lot of decision making, which flows from SIG architecture to release team and the CAP process. With respect to new features, but we can certainly follow some of the more sane rules. And I'm definitely +1 to not, indefinitely stay in beta. It's unfortunate that this hesitation has propagated into the whole project. And if we look at some of the other APIs, for example, Kube Controller Manager, Kube Proxy, those are still stuck in alpha and are completely mass used in everywhere, in production software all over the place. So yes, I agree with the whole notion. A personal trigger for me will be if the kubelet just decides to move to V1 API. I think we probably should just move Kuberium as well, and then think about this redesign if we have to in the future.
Yeah, if I can just mention, yeah, I certainly don't mind us moving Kuberium forwards. I think the beta thing applies to built-in types primarily, and that's because their versioning story is so much weaker than CRDs. So they're very restricted in, well, I mean, they've enforced their own like rules where they want to get rid of the older versions. So I don't think it applies as much to CRDs, where it's very easy to carry old versions and very customer friendly to do so.
Yeah, but in the end of the day, we just for component config, which is ultimately what kubeADM is doing, we just gather ideas from core APIs and try to follow rules. We do similar with feature gates, which, by the way, I think Daniel Smith wants to. He had a proposal to completely remove as a concept in a CAP. So kubeADM has like this mimic concept in terms of what we do with our component config API and the feature set, lifecycle, and deprecation policy in general. But yeah, I'm definitely +1 to follow, even if it's for core APIs, component config. We may just apply the same policy, at least in kubeADM. Nowadays, we don't have this component standard group, which used to delegate responsibility to all components in terms of component config. So we are kind of freestyling. Every component is making a decision. I'm definitely +1 for kubeADM to just follow such a policy to get out of beta as soon as possible. Just like a confidence boost for the project in general.
Yeah, I've only, let me say, one concern is that, for instance, for things like cluster API, what is happening is that while you upgrade the control plane, then there is a period and you have a breaking change, like the change of the API version in kubeadmin. For some period, you cannot join. Basically, from the moment that control plane is upgraded, you cannot join any more nodes with the previous version of kubeadmin. This makes this a little bit painful for the users. But yeah, we can discuss this. We already discussed in the past, so I will report back and comment on the issue as well.
You mean the skew problem, kubeADM?
Yes.
kubeADM versus kubeADM skew problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like a separate problem essentially. It just like I think I said it on the cluster API meeting.
Yeah.
It requires like a cap, and we have to establish what we have to do. Essentially, we can continue releasing APIs, including a V1, but this how do we handle the skew is like a completely different beast, and it's complicated. I haven't spoken to. Actually, there were a couple of people in the last lifecycle meeting, I think, but they did not. Those are kubeADM maintainers. They did not take immediate ownership of this. Like I say, oh, okay, I'm going to handle this. It's complicated, and nobody has started a cap. Maybe after we release this API, maybe I or somebody else can simply start writing a cap. How do we do this? How do we handle this skew problem?
Yeah, that's fair. I think that I was thinking along the lines that you are thinking to split the implementation in multiple releases. So maybe it is just in the first release we make join capable to read the new format, in the next release, we make kubeadmin actually migrate. And so when we migrate, we have a -1 version that can read. But yeah, that's fair. We have to write this down and discuss.
Yeah, I see what you mean. But basically, this was more about how do we put as much features as possible in multiple releases. But the API, what SATA QE proposed is that we keep the API locked, hidden, because it's not part of the schema. It's not convertible. It's just we add features to it, but we don't make it like the default API. I'm not sure how well this. I'm not sure how well this is going to work, but I think I like his idea because it's kind of removes the pressure from us to try to just release an API in one release, which is doable nowadays. 4 months for a cycle is doable, but for Richard, I had a question for you. So how imagine that we do a breaking change such as the extra arcs duplicates problem. So if we completely change the structure of, so now it's a key value which is limited by Go, basically. We cannot have multiple keys, so we have to change the structure. We could mean like a list of structs or something like that, which is a breaking change essentially to users. Like how can Cluster API migrate users? kubeadm has kubeadm config migrate, which is CLI, but how can Cluster API migrate? Just the API object in the cluster?
So in Cluster API, we basically have a shallow copy of all the kubeadmin API versions, and we have a conversion between each of them. So we will read the old one, save the new one, and do conversion. The important is that conversion is possible.
I see. Great. Sometimes I wish we centralize this the external conversion idea, but we just now limited with the whole shallow copy and like mimicking conversion outside of the component. Yeah, but what can we do? It's a API machinery limitation, essentially. All right. I think, yeah.
Thank you for raising this point. I will spread the news and try to come back with some feedback from my own. Okay, I have if there are no comments, I have another topic. So there was a call for action from DIMS about migrating CI jobs to AKS. This is part of the biggest effort to reduce spending / use credits that AWS provided to CNCF. And this is basically the next step after the migration of the registry. I didn't have the time to look at to read it and go through it. It seems pretty easy. But I will take a look and discuss in the office hour. My gut reaction to this is that in CAPI, we should defer this to the next release because the CI team is doing a huge job in getting rid of flakes in order to get ready for the release. And I don't want basically to change things while we are getting at the end of this effort. And so I prefer to let things settle, get the release out, and then start a new cycle of improvement in RCI. But yeah, we will discuss this at the office hour. Cecile?
Yeah, just a note that for all the jobs that are running, that are creating external resources in clouds. So for for example, sorry, cluster API providers, those can't be migrated yet since most of them depend on GCP secrets for auth. So just, yeah, that the migration should only be at this point for anything that is running local tests like lint or unit tests or build. And the other thing to note, I think from what I've seen, there are a lot of PRs that were opened by the test infra folks themselves already. So make sure if you're opening a PR that there isn't already a duplicate. And I think the only like tricky thing that people are running into is that a lot of jobs didn't have like resources, requests and limits set, and those need to be set now. So it's a bit of iteration to determine what are the proper requests and limits values to set.
Justin, I guess this means that we cannot migrate COPS. I know that they're generative jobs, but because of the cloud provider credential stuff, we cannot do it yet.
Correct. And actually, there's a further wrinkle, which is that we want to get support for effectively what's called workload identity or RSA, so that there are no, like today we use credentials that are baked in a secret, and there's another effort at going on to like try to address that at the same time, but it's not trivial, and COPS, I'm not sure if COPS support it, but certainly the testing jobs don't support it today.
I see. All right. For KubeADM specifically, I can log an issue. I think it's possible for us to migrate. We have generative jobs with tooling. We just have to change the cluster field value for in the tool that we use. Because even if test infra send PRs, our tool would basically stomp the whatever values they feed. So I think it's doable for KubeADM. I think they already tried it. One of the jobs, we just stomp it with every time we iterate something there. So I will log an issue, and I think it's doable for KubeADM. We have a good number of tests, so test jobs. So I think we can start saving some money, at least on KubeADM side for now.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that if kubeadmin can work, probably also KubeAD can work, because we are using basically the same machinery. And so yeah, this could be interesting. But I think that also kind is already being migrated. So I'm pretty sure that Ben and the test infra folks are taking care of what they need. Okay. There are no other topics in agenda. I don't know if some of you want to bring some project upgrades. Otherwise, we have some time back today.
Nothing else for me.
Okay, thank you very much. See you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.